Started? Hi everybody, I'm Matt Phillips from Lynfred Winery Wheeling, and today we are talking about wine blends. So it is Thirsty Thursdays. I hope you've got your wine glass handy and your favorite Lynfred wine ready to go. Get my first pour getting started here. I'm drinking our new vintage of 2 Club Cuvee, which we're going to talk about a little bit later, but happy Thirsty Thursday. All right, so what is wine blending? So when you hear wine blending, or blending in general, the first thing you might think of is our good friend, the trusty kitchen appliance, the blender. Now, not traditionally thought of for wine, but this one actually can come in handy for you if you are in a pinch and need to quickly aerate your wine. So pour your bottle of wine into your blender, set it onto your blend setting, and what you're going to do is rapidly add a ton of oxygen to your wine, opening up all the aromas and flavors, and then it is ready for service. Faster than a decanter, a lot faster than a decanter, and then just as fast, maybe not quite as fast as your traditional aerator, but a little something fun to use your blender when you're not making frosé or something like that, just getting your wine nice and aerated. But no, today we are talking about something that is far more exciting in the wine industry, and that is the actual process of winemaker blending. And so this is a process that happens in the cellar. It could happen at different points during the fermentation process, or production process rather. It could start right at the beginning, could sometimes happen right at the end. More often than not, closer to the end, but you never know. That is up to the winemaker. And the cool thing with a blend is that, unlike when you have a sole varietal, we are able to create flavors that are either unexpected or unimaginable otherwise because of the way the two grapes are working together. 2 or more grapes, for that matter. Now, blends unfortunately have some misconceptions associated with them. And so first one is going to be that blends are somehow a trick that winemakers use to unload excess wine. Anytime you have excess wine, it's a rare situation. The winemakers are being very thoughtful when they're making their purchasing, and blends are employed for a couple different reasons. We're going to look for opportunities where we either want to enhance something, perhaps bring out some new flavor profiles, or create something that we haven't done before. And it's you can't take 2 bad wines and put them together and expect them to be good when you blend them. So excess wine isn't really going to be a concern here, that we're trying to pass off less quality wine. What's actually happening is something really thoughtful. And when the winemakers are working on their blends, you might see just the slightest percentage point change, and that can have a drastic difference in what the final product is going to end up tasting like. Another thing that some people think is that blends compared to a sole varietal wine, somehow the sole varietal wine is better quality than a blended wine. Now, there are some grapes that do exceptionally well on their own, 100% good to go, ready right out of the bottle. In other cases, though, they need a little bit of additional help. And something you may notice is, take for example, like our Teroldego 2017. Teroldego 2017 on the label just says Teroldego 2017. But this one actually only has 90% Teroldego. The remaining 10% is Merlot or Cabernet. And what the Cabernet is doing is adding a touch more oak to it and just sort of refining the overall final project, sort of enriches that Teroldego. And it's not a trick. It's a way that the winemakers are able to make this Teroldego a little bit more unique, a little bit more reflective of the Lynfred style. And the reason you don't necessarily see it on the label is because we have over 75% Teroldego in that bottle. And the government says, if you've got 75% Teroldego in there, that's all you need to list on the label. The remaining 25% can be any other grape or grapes that you want. Now, the moment that we go over 25% with any other grape, that's when we need to start either recording it on the label, or if there's multiple grapes that are going over that percentage point and you don't have a clear winner as far as the 75% majority there, you need to either come up with a completely different name or list everything on the label. So take, for example, Fred's Red, or Vinda City Red, or House Red wines. They can be any sort of composition of blend of red or like a white wine grapes, or the Vinda City White that we want. It just ultimately comes down to what the winemakers see fit, but because we have so many different grapes going on there, we can't just call it after one individual grape, because those percentage points might be all over the place. Something else that some people think is that blends are a relatively new phenomenon in the wine world. And it's actually the opposite. Since the very earliest days of winemaking, blending was sort of the thing to do. In fact, we had something called field blends way back when, where you basically, whatever grew in your vineyard, that was what was going to end up in the final product with your wine. Now, we don't see field blends happen all that much, too much these days, but there are some winemakers that do like to highlight that approach, which sort of harkens back to the old world of winemaking. And something, a trend that we might see emerge a little bit more, especially as there's a stronger push towards natural wines or really showcasing that individual vineyard or vineyard space experience within the individual bottle. So for us, we're not going to be doing field blends at Lynfred. We're going to be really more taking the strategy approach with individual varietals and how we can enhance those by putting those together. Something else that when it comes to blending, people think that that blends are, and this kind of goes back to the idea of them not being as prestigious as others. But some of the most famous, most coveted wines in the world are actually blends. So Bordeaux. Bordeaux is probably wine mecca in terms of the wine writer and the wine, the high level wine world. And Bordeaux is not referring to a single grape, or there's no Bordeaux grape. There are Bordeaux grapes, so grapes that grow in the region, and these are all grapes that you see all across the world. Cabernet Sauvignon, Cabernet Franc, Malbec, Merlot, Petit Verdot, and to a lesser extent, Carmenere. Carmenere's kind of fallen out of favor over the course of the last century, but you do still see it pop up every now and then. So those are 6 grapes that we know can do exceptionally well on their own, especially at Lynfred. But in the Bordeaux region, those are the grapes that grow there naturally. And so the French government regulates that if you're going to call something a Bordeaux, it has to feature a blend within those 6 grapes. Really more so the 5 grapes, the Carmenere to a lesser extent. Chateauneuf de Pape, really, really high-level wine from the eastern side of France. And that one is up to 13 grapes in some cases. So you've got a lot of different grapes coming together there. But it's going to fall under the name of Chateauneuf de Pape, falling under the region, as opposed to the individual grape names there. So blends are not new. Blends are not inferior. Blends are a reflection of a thoughtful winemaker. And that's something that we want to remember through this whole process, that the winemakers are being very thoughtful about what they're putting into the individual bottle at the end of the day. So let's get to the wine that I'm drinking today, and that is our new 2 Club Cuvee. And the 2 Club Cuvee, there we go. You'll notice that I had to put my 2021 on there because I've got a bunch of 2020 2 Club Cuvées that I have not consumed yet that I'm laying down for a little while, and I want to make sure that I separated this one out so I knew that this one's different. So 2 Club Cuvée is only available for our select 2 Club members. So we do not sell this wine. It's only available as your member gift if you are a member of 2 of the new release, white, red, or dessert or sparkling wine clubs. And so with that, each month you get your blend of 2 Club Cuvée at no additional cost to you. So if you're curious about that, stop into your Roselle or Wheeling location. We'll be happy to tell you more about the 2 Club Cuvée to add that to your account. But in the meantime, this one that I'm drinking here today, this is a 48% Merlot, 32% Teroldego, 14% Syrah, 4% Petit Verdot, and 2% Norton blend. And something else cool that's happening here is we're not just using grapes from the West Coast. So that Norton that we threw in there, that's actually coming from Southern Illinois. So a really cool showcase of some of the major regions that we work with, Washington, California, and Southern Illinois, all coming together in this blend. And we also used French and American oak for this latest batch. And French oak, as we've discussed before, is subtle. It's expensive, but imparts kind of a subtle almond vanilla note to your wine. And then you get the more robust flavors coming off the American oak. So cool balance of those 2 oak styles going on there. And again, another showcase of 2 different styles of oak that we use in the cellar. So if you kind of want to sum up what Lynfred is all about when it comes to our reds, 2 Club Cuvée is a really nice representation of that. So right off the bat, some nice fruit on the nose, some good raspberry, cassis notes. You get some oak in there as well. Cherry. And a kind of a chocolatey coffee mocha type experience going on the palate. It feels like it needs something smoky to go along with it. I think smoke would be a really cool complement to the fruit and the oak that we have going on here. Take like a smoked Gouda or smoked Gouda on a burger. Anything coming off the grill, I think would be lovely here. Um, wow. And just kind of keeps lingering with that chocolate. So you get like this raspberry chocolate note that just kind of hangs out in your mouth after the fact. Super, super tasty. So we've got a blend here with 5 different grapes going into that blend. And it might seem like a lot to do 5 grapes in a blend, but again, Chef enough to pop 13 grapes, so you never know. But each of these grapes can do just fine on their own, but in this case are really working exceptionally well together. And so it's kind of like a music group. Some of them can have phenomenal solo careers, but when you bring them all together, it can make for just an amazing listening experience. So like Fleetwood Mac and the solo career of Stevie Nicks, or to a lesser extent, Lindsey Buckingham. Things that do really well on their own, but even better when they're all together. And that's kind of a cool take with wine blending, that we're able to sort of match up these different styles and create something that is totally unique to itself. There's other times too where you think of something that may not necessarily in our minds connect initially. When I think about like Tony Bennett and Lady Gaga performing together, there's certain grape blends that may not sound like they're going to work initially, and then when you taste them in the blend together with that skilled winemaker, you're going to get something that's really beautiful coming out from the final product. So blends are each sort of playing its own part, and each grape in those different proponents are playing their roles and showcasing themselves, but buoying each other in the process. So not one grape is going to be really standing out from that blend. They're all working together to create that final product. I mentioned this earlier, but when it comes to production, generally we're blending nearing the end of the fermentation and aging process. So what we're going to do is vinify all the wines individually. So in the case of like the 2 Club Cuvee, all 5 of those grapes went through their full fermentation cycle on their own within their own little family. So it was all Norton grapes on their own, all Petit Verdot grapes on their own, all Syrah grapes on their own, Merlot, Teroldego, and so forth. And then before they went into the bottle, the winemakers went into our laboratory and they played around with the different proponents there. And they reached a point where they said that the best flavor profiles are going to come when we have 48% Merlot, 32% Teroldego, and working our way all the way down to 2% of Norton. And 2% might not seem like that much, but when you're in the lab and you're seeing how just these different flavor profiles come together, that small addition can make a huge impact in rounding out the flavor or deepening the color or just creating an overall better experience once it hits our palate. Another option is co-fermentation, and this is a little bit more rare and something relatively new in recent Lynfred history, but that is where you're taking all of the grapes at the beginning and putting them together from the start of the fermentation process. This is a risky approach, but high risk yields high reward, hopefully. And so with a co-fermentation, we're going to say, okay, we're going to put all of our grapes together into the fermentation tank and let those grapes ferment together and go through that full maturation process from grape to wine. And what happens here is, unlike when you're blending after the wines were vinified separately, as the grapes are working together through that fermentation process, they're creating new flavor profiles that would be unimaginable if you didn't have them together from the get-go. And so 2 wines that I have here are the Assemblage 2018. This was our release back in January. And this one is a blend of Syrah and Merlot. And Assemblage, or you've also probably heard it as assemblage. Assemblage comes from a French term for wine blending. And years ago, we had some French winemakers visiting the winery. And I, speaking French, had the opportunity to take them on a tour of the production facility. And through the course of that tour, I mistakenly referred to one of our blends as a mélange. We know mélange, something that you mix together. Well, the winemakers very kindly explained to me that when you say mélange, it sounds like it's kind of a thoughtless process. And this goes back to that whole idea of being thoughtful about what we're putting into it. And so assemblage connotes a certain level of expertise, a certain level of restraint that goes into the winemaking process, and that they're being very thoughtful about every single component that goes into that final blend. So assemblage referring back to that tradition of very thoughtful wine blending. So 66% Syrah, 34% Merlot, and unique Lynfred blend here. Nice amount of oak presence as well. We love that 24 months or 28 months, that sort of sweet spot window for the oak aging for our red wines. A lot of plum, vanilla, cocoa notes to that one. Strong tannin, but it's starting to relax a little bit as it's been hanging out in the bottle. and really beautiful with charcuterie boards, kind of thing you just sort of open up in the afternoon and sort of drink all night long. Another co-fermented favorite, especially in my house, is the Teroldego Petite Sirah blend, or commonly known as TPS in the tasting room. And so Teroldego Petite Sirah, again, co-fermented, 65% Teroldego and 35% Petite Sirah, really smooth, some sage notes, some leather coming off the oak there, and then this nice black currant and clove flavor. Really pleasing to the palate, super smooth, kind of thing you could drink, again, all night. And these are flavor profiles where, yeah, we do see some indicative flavors coming from Teroldego and Petite Sirah shining through here, but they've also merged in a way that has created something that I don't think we could have found if we would have just blended individually vinified Teroldego and Petite Sirah. By starting off from the get-go with these, we created something that was a little something different. Petite Sirah, additionally, is one of those grapes that blends really well. Cabernet is a grape that blends well. But Petite Sirah, it's often used in Lynfred wine blending because it's an inkier color, it's a really intense flavor, and if you add that little bit, it can add a certain oomph to your individual vintages of different red wines. Now, some grapes don't blend exceptionally well together, or at least traditionally do not. Cabernet Sauvignon and Pinot Noir, you don't often see those two in a blend together because the grapes almost fight. Now, that's not to say that a skilled winemaker cannot make that work. It's just more rare that you would see Cabernet and Pinot Noir ending up in the same bottle. I often think of it in terms of, whatever happened to Baby Jane. We got Joan Crawford and Betty Davis. Kind of hate each other behind the scenes. Together made a really awesome movie. So it's possible that these two could come together. But in most other circumstances, you got a lot of contrast coming at each other and some really intense eyebrows. Years ago, Lynfred made a Cabernet Zinfandel blend, and delicious, staff favorite, absolutely loved it. And what was cool there was we had a textbook in the tasting room that told us explicitly Cabernet and Zinfandel have no business being in the same bottle together. And kudos to our winemakers at Lynfred for being able to say, no, we can make it work, just comes down to the right proponents and the right grapes. Blends also aren't exclusive to red wines. You can also find white wine blends. So one that we are currently featuring is our non-vintage Marsanne Chardonnay. So I say non-vintage because if you see a vintage year on the label, that means that all those grapes came from the same year's harvest. In the case of the Marsanne Chardonnay, we did not take all the grapes from the same harvest. The Marsanne grapes are a little bit older than the Chardonnay grapes, and we did that because we let the Marsanne rest on their lees, sort of the dead yeast cells that sort of form in the fermentation process. As they sit there and the wine sits with those lees, it creates a creamy texture to the wine. We then blended that with a really young, bright, tropical Chardonnay. And so the end result is this silky, really kind of fun texture. You get a little bit of nuttiness going on there without actually being oak aged, and these bright tropical fruit notes to it. So coming together in a way, 55% Marsanne, 45% Chardonnay, and grapes that do work well together. Marsanne is sort of, if Chardonnay was its own town, Marsanne would be like the next suburb outside of that city. There's some similarity, some crossover there, but together they're really creating a nice flavor profile because of the two different styles coming together. So you get this creamy consistency coming in with that bright tropical note. Our rosé. Our classic rosé is a blend. I believe there's 4 or 5 different red wine grapes that go into that one. Rosso Leggero is another fantastic blend where we took Pinot Noir juice and fermented it over Muscat skins. And then in the sparkling family, sparkling almond, sparkling rosé, sparkling Vindicity, all blends. And they're sort of fantastic because they're blends, but you don't also immediately need to know that. They can sort of stand alone on their own as just being, well, this is the sparkling Vindicity, and whatever goes into it doesn't really matter because it's just pleasing to our palate when all is said and done. Something else that Lynfred can do that some other wineries are not able to do is blend with different regions. So because we're sourcing our grapes entirely, we don't have our own vineyards, we have contracts in California, Washington, Southern Illinois, Southwest Michigan, and now upstate New York, we can create blends from different regions. And in some cases, we'll even take the same grape from 2 different regions and put them together. So when you take Cabernet grapes from Washington State and Cabernet grapes from California, and those come together, you get flavor profiles you wouldn't be able to achieve with just a Washington or just a California cab. We can create something that is, in our minds, uniquely American and uniquely Lynfred. because we were sort of combining that idea of terroir from two different places. So terroir, this sort of hard to translate term from French that basically demonstrates the place where the grapes were grown being reflected in that final product for the wine. And so by taking those two different regions and putting them together, we create new flavor profiles. We create new experiences and are able to sort of mess with the palate a little bit. When you think that, okay, I know what a Merlot should taste like, and then I add in California and Washington Merlot to the same blend, I'm getting something totally different. Our final one is a take on a New World take on an Old World blend. And so that is our Zinfandel Petite Sirah Viognier. Now, yes, I said Viognier. So there is a white wine in this red wine blend. Crazy, right? Comes back to the Rhone region in France. So in the Rhone region, Syrah and Viognier grow quite well. And tradition dating back centuries is adding a little bit of Viognier to your Syrah to, surprisingly enough, deepen the color, but also because Viognier is such a beautiful aromatic grape, it brightens the fruit and the floral notes to your Syrah. And it's usually in small quantities, just maybe 4 or 5% Viognier going into that particular blend. And so what we did here was take two more kind of New World style grapes, but blending in that Viognier as well. So Zinfandel, while being Croatian in origin, we kind of think of it as being a grape that's thrived exceptionally well in the United States. And then blending that with Petite Sirah, which again, a Lynfred favorite for blending, but also that bright, inky, intense, kind of sexy flavor that comes together with it. And Zin Petite Sirah on their own would be delicious. But this Viognier is adding this really bright, fruity, floral note to this individual wine. Also has a really beautiful color. I should have poured some tonight because it catches the light really, really well. But raspberry and vanilla, and then sort of this lingering chocolate on the palate. And the Petite Sirah and the Zin has that little bit of bite, so you do get this almost like black tea quality to it. So that tannin's still there, but you're also getting this bright experience. So all of the fruit, all the florals sort of traveling up into your nose, and it takes away some of the intensity you would get from that black tea. Everything balances out. It's all about balance. And this is restraint. 4% Viognier going into that blend. If we did much more than that, the florals would overwhelm, and it wouldn't be so harmonious together. So again, really kudos to the winemakers for knowing exactly when to stop. Kind of the Coco Chanel tradition of take something, off from your ensemble before you leave the house. It's a little bit of self-editing. Same deal with the winemaking process. It's knowing when to quit and saying, okay, these are the blends, these are the components that we want to put together because this is going to make the best possible wine for us to enjoy. And with that, I hope you've learned a little bit of something about blends. I hope you will explore more wine blends with us, and I look forward to seeing you all in the Lynfred Winery tasting room very soon. So to blends and a Thirsty Thursday, cheers.